The objective of this lesson is to divide decimals by a whole number when the initial quotient has a remainder. In the previous lesson, students practiced dividing decimals by a whole number using base 10 blocks. In this lesson, we will continue to use base 10 blocks and partitive division to divide a decimal by a whole number. We will encounter remainders and explore how to decompose and repartition a remainder as a decimal part of the quotient. Let's consider the following situation. Mrs. Kingston purchased 4 beach balls for her kids for a trip to the beach. She paid $2.60 for all 4 beach balls. How much did each one cost? We will begin by representing the total cost of the beach balls using our base 10 blocks. $2 is represented by 2 wholes, while 60 cents is represented by 6/10. Since Mrs. Kingston purchased 4 balls, and our goal is to calculate the cost of each ball, we will divide the total cost by 4, or into 4 groups. We are unable to partition 2 wholes into 4 groups without first decomposing them. We can separate each whole into 10/10. This gives us a total of 26/10. Now we can separate the tenths into 4 groups, 1/10 at a time. Notice we have 2/10 remaining. 2/10 is the remainder of our division expression. We are unable to further partition these tenths into 4 groups unless we first decompose them into smaller units. We can do this by ungrouping the tenths into hundredths. Each tenth is equivalent to 10 hundredths, so we will have 20 hundredths. We can now divide our 20 hundredths into 4 groups the same way we did with our tenths. Each group received 5 hundredths from the tenths we decomposed. We have now fully divided 2 wholes and 6/10 into 4 groups. Each group contains 6/10 and 5 hundredths. In terms of cost, this represents that each beach ball costs 65 cents. In our next example, we will use the box, line, dot method to visually represent base 10 blocks instead of using the blocks directly. Kinsey and Leah collected 1 7/10 pounds of candy while trick-or-treating on Halloween. If they wanted to equally divide the candy between the 2 of them, how much would each girl get? Our expression is 1 7/10 divided by 2. We can represent the 1 7/10 pounds of candy with 1 box or whole and 7 lines, or tenths. We can also represent the 2 girls with 2 circles into which we will partition the candy. Before we can begin dividing 1 pound, we need to decompose it into smaller units, 10/10 of a pound. We now have 17/10 represented by 17 lines. 1 whole and 7/10 is equivalent to 17/10. Now we can divide our tenths into 2 groups. We have placed 8/10 into each group, leaving us with 1/10 of a pound as the remainder. We are unable to divide 1/10 into 2 groups without decomposing it into smaller units, in this case 10 hundredths of a pound. Now we have 10 hundredths left to divide into 2 groups. Each group received 8/10 and 5 hundredths. Since we have fully partitioned our original 1 7/10 pounds of candy, we know each girl will receive 8/10 and 5 hundredths of a pound, or 85 hundredths of a pound. The objective of this lesson was to divide decimals by a whole number while decomposing and repartitioning a remainder. We met this objective by using base 10 blocks and the box, line, dot method to represent our decimal numbers.